The name indicates the purpose of this paper. This work aims to handle large-scale networks. Although various approaches have been introduced, those methods were not scalable when the number of vertices or edges of the networks is extremely large, which is usually magnitude of millions in real-world networks. And this work aims to embed vertices in given network in low-dimensional vector space. Those vectors can be used for visualization, link prediction, node classification, etc. In the task of network embedding, we embed vertices in the network into low-dimensional vector space. Each vertex can be represented as column vectors of adjacency matrix. However, computation for downstream tasks is expensive since those vectors are in extremely large dimension. Since the number of vertices is large and usually semantical similarities or geometrical similarities cannot be represented in those discrete vector space. Task of network embedding aims to embed vertices into low-dimensional vector space to tackle those problems, and those vectors can be used for various downstream tasks. There are two main challenges for network embedding. First, in real-world scenario, there are millions or billions of nodes in networks. To handle those large-scale networks, presented methods should be efficient in terms of memory complexity and time complexity. Second, kinds of edges in networks can be different. Some networks can have directed edges. On the other hand, some networks can have undirected edges. And some networks can have binary edges, and some networks can have weighted edges. In this paper, authors introduced methods which show promising results for those challenges. Those are contributions of this work. First, presented methods by the authors can handle arbitrary types of networks. Second, authors provide clear objective function which can preserve two different types of proximity. I will explain those terminology, what is proximity and what is difference between those proximity, and why do we need two different types of proximity. Third, the methods are scalable. To achieve this goal, authors used asynchronous stochastic gradient descent methods to optimize the model. Training of the model only takes few hours even for millions of nodes. Proximity indicates how two nodes are close to each other, and first-order proximity means local pairwise proximity between nodes. If the weight of the edge connecting two nodes is high, first-order proximity is also high. First-order proximity can capture local closeness between two nodes. However, many links between the nodes are not observed in sparse network, and first-order proximity cannot capture global structural information of the network. Therefore, we only have insufficient local information when we use first-order proximity to represent nodes. Second-order proximity measures how close the neighborhood structures of the nodes. Those two nodes colored with orange can be similar in terms of neighborhood structure since those two nodes share common neighbors. Second-order proximity can capture semantical similarity of two nodes better than first-order proximity. For example, in NLP area, we can think two words are semantically similar if surrounding words of each word are similar. And for social network, we can think two users are tied strongly if friends of two users are hugely overlapped. To encode the two kinds of proximity, we can estimate the empirical probability distribution and model distribution, and design an objective function representing this similarity between empirical distribution and model distribution. In first-order proximity, empirical distribution is represented as normalized edge weight, and authors use inner products of two node vectors and softmax function to represent model distribution. To optimize the model, a natural measure to represent dissimilarity between two probabilistic distributions is KL divergence, and we can simplify loss function as unnormalized cross entropy by excluding irrelevant terms. Second order proximity is represented by conditional probability. Empirical distribution, model distribution, and objective function can be represented analogously to first order proximity. The only difference is normalizing factor to represent conditional probability. With constraint of memory and computation, and for the purpose of scalability of training, we have to use some tricks. First, the computation for calculating normalizing factors of softmax function is extremely expensive when there are a large number of vertices. Negative sampling approaches can be used. We can represent probability distribution using sigmoid function rather than softmax function and introduce negative samples to discriminate close nodes and distant nodes. Second, in naive gradient descent approach, you can see that the weight of the edge is multiplicative factor of gradient. And if the variance of the weight is large, gradient descent approach easily experience gradient exploding. Others handle this issue using edge sampling method. They treat edges as binary edges and preserve weight information by sampling those binary edges with proportional to original weights. This approach makes the complexity of the method linear to the number of edges. Additionally, there are a few more issues for network embedding. First, there can be nodes with few neighbors. If we compute the degree of nodes, usually networks shows us long-tail distribution. To reliably embed those nodes, we can expand neighbors by adding higher-order neighbors. Previously, deep work method used depth-first search to expand neighbors. In this work, authors use breadth-first search by recursively adding neighbors of neighbors until there are sufficient number of neighbors for nodes with few neighbors. In experiments, they show that BFS expansion can increase the performance when the network is sparse. Second, there can be newly included nodes which are not seen in training phase. We can embed those nodes by fixing existing nodes and optimizing only those newly included nodes. Now I will introduce some experiments. They experiments with various networks with different properties. First, they experiments on language network. They used Wikipedia dataset to construct the network graph. The edge weights of the nodes are log of number of co-occurrence without direction. Therefore, the networks are undirected and weighted graph. They evaluate the network embedding method on word analogy and document classification. Second, they experiments on social networks. They used Flickr and YouTube dataset. In particular, YouTube dataset is extremely sparse. Average degree is as low as 5. They evaluate the network embedding method on multi-label classification. Word analogy listening task is firstly introduced in word-to-back paper by Mikolov. Given two same relation with different consisting words, model takes a pair of two words and half of the other pair and have to properly predict the other half of the pair. First, line method using second order proximity outperforms all other methods, which shows that second order proximity captures a semantical similarity between words better than first order proximity. Second, even line of first order proximity outperforms deep work. Although deep work exploits higher order proximity, deep work cannot handle weighted edges, and weight information reflecting the number of co-occurrences between two words are quite important to encode semantical similarity. Third, naive stochastic gradient descent approaches are significantly worse than any other methods. This result shows that training using SGD is quite unstable. On the other hand, using edge sampling, the optimization can be stabilized. Finally, line methods are faster than others, at least 10%, which indicates that line methods are scalable for large-scale networks. Authors evaluated their models using YouTube dataset. Each node is assigned into one or more communities. The model should classify nodes with multiple labels using embedded vectors. As you can see, deep work outperforms line methods. Unlike language networks, networks from social media are much more sparse. Since deep work can enrich the neighbors by random walk in DFS manner, deep work can embed vectors using more sufficient neighborhood information in sparse networks. By concatenating vectors from line of two different proximity, the model can outperform deep work. This performance gain came from complementary information between two different kinds of proximity, and those mutual information makes the model able to address sparsity problem. Furthermore, as deep work expand neighbors using random walk in DFS manner, we can expand neighbors using BFS. For low degree vertices, they recursively add neighbors of neighbors until there are thousands of neighbors for those nodes. By expanding neighbors, we can enrich context of the nodes, and it also increases performance. As we discussed in previous slide, concatenation of vectors from line of two different kinds of proximity increases the performance. It suggests that two different proximity induce the strengths and weakness of the model in different situations. This graph shows that line of first order proximity is stronger than second order proximity when the networks are sparse. But as more edges are constructed between nodes, line of second order proximity outperforms line of first order proximity with large margin. This explains that why using both proximity can increase the performance when network is sparse. In this paper, authors introduced the model named line. First, since the model has linear time complexity in terms of number of edges, with help of edge sampling method, the model is scalable to very large networks containing millions of nodes. Second, the model can be used independently with the types of the networks. It can be used for directed, undirected, weighted, and binary edge networks. Third, they introduced second-order proximity, which complements the sparsity of the first-order proximity and better preserve the global structure of the networks. Finally, edge sampling optimization algorithm enables the model to be stably trained and improves the efficiency of the inference. Thank you for listening.